My name is Daniel Kwan, and I'm now 40 years old. Thank you, thank you, thank you. About a week ago, I made a story post on Instagram asking you young people what you would like to know from me as someone who just turned 40 years old. I thought Instagram was going to keep the responses, but it turns out Instagram only keeps the responses for like a couple of days. So I don't have the questions that you guys wrote, but I did read them. And I remember that most of them were about career. Like, what kind of career should you choose? How do you know what career path you're supposed to take? What to do if you're in your 30s and you don't know what you're supposed to do? So in this video, I'm gonna kinda sorta answer that question. I'm gonna spend a few minutes talking about my career path, and then we'll talk about what I would have done differently if I could do things over, and also the things that I think I did right, things that I could recommend that you guys do as well, maybe. So about my so-called career path. When I was a teenager, I thought I was gonna become an animator because I was pretty good at drawing, at least compared to my peers. So I ended up going to a college for animation, but I never worked a day in animation. I ended up getting into photography. It's really weird, but most of my photography jobs were shooting quinceañeras. That's when a Latina girl turns 15 and they have this big celebration. So I did that for a while, and I was going to move to Los Angeles. By the way, at the time I was living with my parents in Fremont, California. So I thought about moving to Los Angeles just because it's someplace different. It's kind of far, but not really. Instead of moving to Los Angeles, I ended up moving to China, to Shanghai. A family friend in Shanghai had an opportunity for me to work at his factory. Not on the factory line, but in the office in the factory. So I was supposed to work there for a year and then come back to the US to help run his business in the US. It didn't work out that way. The year was 2008, so if you guys remember, the whole economy crashed. My whole department was shut down. So I could either move back to the US or I could stay in China and find another job. Well, I ended up staying, and I pretty quickly found another job as a design manager at a magazine company. I worked there also for less than a year. After about 9 months, I quit because I was working overtime every single day and also every weekend. I ended up saving up a lot of money because I had no time to spend the money. So because I had a bit of savings, I tried some different stuff. Did a bunch of side gigs like photography, proofreading, building websites. I also worked in a couple of failed startups. Before my money completely ran out, one of my former coworkers approached me and talked about starting a business together, building websites. So we started a website building company. Now that might sound like a silly idea, but at least back then, at the time, there were many foreigners in Shanghai who were starting up their small businesses and they needed an English-speaking website designer. So I happened to fit that need. The business didn't make a lot of money and it ended up not being that fun. Like, I thought it was gonna be a fun job where, you know, I get to design websites and work whenever I want. But in the end, it was kind of just like another job. And then I took a vacation that changed my life.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom. Oh, freedom over me.
I won't go too much into details, but basically I spent a month just not working. Originally, it was going to be 2 weeks in Thailand, and I did go to Thailand. I met up with my friend there, my friend from the US. He flew from San Francisco, I flew in from Shanghai, and we met there. But by coincidence, I also had friends from other countries in Thailand at the same time. We didn't have the same itineraries, but our itineraries all overlapped, and we were all in Bangkok at the same time. And all of these were friends whom I hadn't seen in a really long time. It was kind of like a reunion. That may not sound like much, but certain magical things that happen in Thailand stay in Thailand. After Thailand, I went to Taiwan to meet with my friend there. He needed some help, so I went over. This was a friend from the UK who used to live in Shanghai, and we used to have some adventures in Shanghai. By the way, I'm very much not a social person, so for me to be hanging out with all these friends from a long time ago, it was pretty cool. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that would happen to me, so it felt pretty special. But anyway, when I finally went back to Shanghai, I had spent about a month not working. I was just like hanging out, chilling with my friends. And in a way, I had been semi-chilling ever since. Because when I went back to Shanghai, I didn't want to work anymore, especially not at that stupid web design job. I was fortunate that the web design company had at least some kind of semi-passive income. It wasn't a lot of money, but it bought me time to just kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And how I spent that time was working on YouTube videos. When I went to Thailand, I had brought an electric skateboard with me and I made a video about about it. That video ended up getting some views, getting some subscribers. Before that, my channel was stuck at about like 15 to 20 subscribers. And because of that video, it went to about 100. For me, that was pretty significant. And I just continued making videos about electric skateboards. So I've been doing that for the past 5 years. Wow, wait. Yeah, almost 5 years, since the middle of 2017. There's no way for me to know for sure, but today I'm probably making the most in affiliate sales for electric skateboards out of anybody. I mean, I'm not rich or anything, and I'm pretty frugal, but I live a very comfortable life on that income. I don't consider that income to be stable though, so I'm always on the lookout for what I'll be doing next. So that's kind of a summary of my career path, which as you could see wasn't really much of a path. It was kind of just like all over. But what can we learn from this? First, let's talk about what I feel like I did wrong, or things that I feel like I would have done differently if I could do things over. First of all, I wish I had more business experience before I went off and worked for myself. For example, for photography, if I could do things over, I would work for another photographer first, someone with a well-established business that I maybe wanted to emulate, instead of just doing freelance work and picking up random projects here and there. For those of you who want to work for yourself, work for someone else first. Learn as much as you can. Learn about the business side of things, not just whatever skill is needed for your job, but learn about the business. How do they get customers? How do they deal with customers? How do they package their services? Stuff like that. And then go out on your own. For the couple of jobs where I worked for someone else, I wish I had stood up for myself more. So at the factory job, my job there was kind of just miscellaneous stuff that had to do with English, like making sales calls to foreigners and making graphics that had English words on them. It was a really stupid job. But another thing they also had me do was teach English to my coworkers. Now, some of you might think of this as fun, but for me, I never wanted to teach English. I'm not that kind of person, but I just went with it. I didn't say anything about it. I just did it. If I could do things over, I would have been like, nah, I'm not teaching English. I mean, it's not what I do. Sorry. And at the magazine company, like I said, I was working overtime every single day. If I could do things over, I would have said something. I mean, in hindsight, I don't really know why I just let them take advantage of me like that. I mean, they knew I was overworked. They knew they needed to hire more people, but I should have insisted on it. I should have insisted that they hire more people right now. Eventually, they hired one person. It wasn't enough because I still had to train him. I still had to manage him. They really needed to hire a second me. But yeah, I wish I had done something about that because I actually liked that job. I liked what I was doing. I was pretty good at it. Anyway, yeah, don't let your employer take advantage of you. If something's not going well, say something. Either they'll do something about it or they won't. Another thing I wish I had done differently was when I left the magazine job, I was doing a bunch of different things instead of focusing on any one thing. I mean, trying different stuff for a while is fine, but I think I spent too much time trying different stuff. Like I was doing website design, I was doing photography, I was doing proofreading. I wasn't focusing my efforts on any one thing. None of them were really making much money because they weren't really businesses, you know? Eventually, I focused on web design. I was able to make a business out of it, and I started that with a partner. Now, because I'm a foreigner in China, I can't technically start a business, at least not by myself. I have to partner with someone. At least that's my understanding. I'm not really sure. We did run into some issues, I mean, which is to be expected. Like, if you're gonna have a partnership, you're gonna have some conflicts. But I think some of those conflicts could have been avoided simply by not being a 50-50 partnership. For example, you could make it 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, whatever. Make it not even so that it's very clear who is gonna be the final decision maker. Like if you disagree with something, you default to that person. I know so far these are all like random work advice and not really career related, but I'll get to some of that very soon. Now let's talk about what I think I did right. Quitting that magazine job where I was working overtime every day, I think that was the right move. Obviously it wasn't healthy and it was also affecting my relationship. I didn't have a life. My work was my life, which I didn't like that. So I quit, moved on. Having many different hobbies in creative and technical fields, I think was beneficial. I never really feel like I wouldn't be able to get a job somewhere, and the pay was never that much of an issue. I'll get to that. But as for jobs, I always feel like I can get a job. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, but I think I'm pretty decent at a good number of things, and I'm able to combine those skills. To be clear, I did spend many years on the verge of basically broke, but I was never in debt. I guess that brings me to my next point. knowing how to live within my means. I think I have my parents to thank for that. They always taught me to live a frugal life. Like, I don't really have any desire for brand name luxury stuff. If I had to, I can live on very little. It's partly because I can be frugal, and the other part is because I'm living in China. So even though I'm in Shanghai, which is either the #1 or #2 most expensive city in China, you don't have to live an expensive life. You can absolutely live a very lavish and expensive lifestyle here, but you don't have to. There's always a cheaper apartment as long as you're willing to lower your standards. There's always cheaper food. Living in Shanghai, I never felt like I would ever become homeless. I mean, worst case scenario, I would move back with my parents, but it never came to that. What I'm trying to say is, if you can live with very little money, then you can spend a lot of time trying different things. Something that helped with that was looking into minimalism. So at one point, I looked into becoming a digital nomad. I never became one, but I looked into it. A digital nomad is someone who works online and moves around the world. Being a minimalist is a part of doing that. I gave minimalism a try. It didn't work out, but just from trying it really made me look at stuff, look at possessions differently. I now see every possession as something that I have to maintain. So the more things that I have, the more time I have to spend on maintaining them, and the less time I have for other stuff, for stuff that I actually want to do. It's not about being poor, but it does help you live more comfortably with less. I would recommend anyone to look into it. You don't have to become a minimalist, but just studying it and looking into it, I think it could be beneficial. So let's get back to talking about careers. So I've told you about my career path, which I guess wasn't really a career path, but that's kind of how I want it. A career may become a big part of your life, but it doesn't have to define your life. It doesn't even have to be a big part of your life. We've all been told while growing up that we're supposed to go to college, we're supposed to pick a major, graduate, and get a job related to that major, get married, get a house, get kids, not get kids, but have kids or get kids. But why? You don't have to do any of that. Why should your life be a carbon copy of someone else's? At 40 years old, I don't think I've ever figured out what my career path should be, but I have figured out what I want. And if I'm being completely honest, what I want is to always have more freedom. I don't want to be stuck doing any one thing. I want to be able to switch to doing something else whenever I feel like it. You can kind of think of life as a video game where everything you do helps you gain experience. And you know how for certain tasks, once you level up to a certain amount, the experience that you gain no longer matters and you have to move on to something else? So that's true of video games and also for life. Always be learning, always be gaining experience points. If you've stopped gaining experience points, move on to something else. Try to find a job where you can learn something on the job. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you're interested in. I know some people say you're supposed to find a job where you're doing what you love. The way I feel about that is the things I love to do change every few years. So even if I'm working at a job doing what I love right now, in a few years, that's not going to be the case anymore. People change, so I wouldn't worry too much about career path. You don't have to know what you're supposed to do. I hope this video has been helpful for some of you. I know, okay, if you're a parent watching this, maybe you're thinking, this guy's giving terrible advice. Maybe so, but yeah, that's how I feel about careers. If this video is helpful, please hit the like button. If you dislike this video, hit the dislike button. No one's gonna see your dislike anyway. And leave a comment. Let me know how you feel about careers. See ya.